In this day and age, if you want to get yourself a nice artisan loaf, then it can cost you up to £4.50, £5 a loaf. And quite a lot of work goes into it, so no disrespect to the bakers who bake the loaves, but it can be quite expensive for a loaf of bread. But in this video, I hope to prove to you that you can make a nice, decent artisan loaf at home, pretty similar to a sourdough loaf, with a yeast base that's still pretty decent and pretty easy to make. So the point of this video, well, is to make an artisan loaf at home, nice and simply, a couple of ingredients, and it's going to cost you pence rather than pounds, and you get a nice fresh smell of homemade bread in your house at the end of it. Okay, so artisan bread at home, it's a damn sight cheaper and it's not too difficult. Here we go, let's do this. Let's cook bread. We are going to start out by measuring some tepid warm water, and we're going to need 220 millilitres of nice warm water. We want this water at blood temperature, about 37 C, 98 Fahrenheit. I over measured, so I'm going to take a little bit out to get it to 220. Now, resetting the scales, we're going to add 4 grams of caster sugar. Now, the yeast feeds on sugars, that's why the sugar is going into water. And now we're going to weigh out 2 grams of dry yeast. That warm water is perfect for the dried yeast and helps activate it, and the sugar will feed the yeast to help it grow. Now, once the yeast is in there, you don't want it sat on top of the water, so you want to give it a nice mix to help that yeast activate in the water. And now let's give that yeast 10 minutes to activate, and while it's activating, we're going to weigh out the flour and the salt. Now, we're going to weigh out 320 grams of bread flour. Making bread, it's got to be bread flour, it's high in protein and it's what you need. The next, in goes 1 teaspoon of salt. We keep the salt separate from the yeast to start with because salt kills yeast, but it's there to give the bread a good flavour. Okay, now we're going to add our liquid with our yeast, water and sugar into the flour and salt. And taking a really large wooden spoon, we're going to mix that round. We're going to make this recipe exactly like you would sourdough. Don't be scared, nice and easy, but this is the stage where you introduce the water and the flour. And if you're thinking about becoming a bread buff, the technical term for this is autolyse. Now, while all those elements make friends, we're going to leave that for half an hour just so it combines nicely. And now cover that with cling film or a damp cloth just so it doesn't dry out. I'm going to leave that for half an hour at room temperature. Now the dough's had half an hour to rest, we're going to start stretching that dough to get the gluten out. For this, you're going to need a dish of cold water just so the dough doesn't stick to your fingers. And now we're going to lift up one side of the dough just like this, fold it over, turn the bowl, lift it again, fold it over, and repeat that 4 times on 4 sides. And now it's time to get that gluten really working in the dough. So we're going to fold our hand underneath the dough, lift it up and then slap it back into the bowl. And repeat this several times to get the dough nice and shiny. Like I said, keep your hand wet, this will stop the dough sticking to your fingers, but fold your hand underneath the dough, lift it up and then slap it back down onto the table. I actually find it better on a work surface, but doing it in a bowl obviously is a lot cleaner. And now we're going to cover that dough up for another 30 minutes, letting it relax, thinking it's got away with it before we give it another damn good beating. And now after 30 minutes, we're going to wet our hand again and then repeat that process. We're going to fold the sides over, get a nice stretch to that dough, get that gluten out, stretch each side, all 4 sides, fold it over the dough, and then we're going to pick it up, lift it and slap it back down again. Slap that dough. Now at this stage, your dough should be getting nice and shiny. Now I just fold it over like this, like we did at the beginning. Look at that shine on that dough. And now we're going to cover it and rest it for 2 hours for it to actually prove. And after 2 hours, your dough should have doubled in size with lots of nice big air bubbles inside it. And at this stage, a lot of chefs punch the air out of the dough. Personally, I like to keep that air in there to help me prove for a second time. Now at this stage, we can flour a surface ready to turn the dough out. And now, taking a pastry scraper or the back of a knife, as long as it's not sharp on that side, I'm going to cut this dough into half. You can cut it into 4 pieces if you want to get some nice little rolls, but I'm going to cut it into half to get 2 medium-sized loaves. Now, carefully lifting one out of the way, we're going to shape the other one. The technical term for this is giving the bread tension. What we're trying to do is form an outside skin so the bread can hold its own shape with a high hydration rate inside, giving you nice big bubbles and a nice crispy crust. So we're going to fold the dough 4 sides in, a little bit like we did before in a bowl. So we've got a nice kind of tight ball. And now we're just going to spin that dough around with our hand just to seal up the bottom of the dough. And now lifting the ball out of the way, we're going to put it to one side as we do the same steps with the other half. If we want to turn this dough into 4 rolls, then simply just cut it into 4 Repeat the process 4 times. Now they're in balls, we're going to leave them for 10 minutes just to get a skin on the outside to help that surface tension. Now, after 10 minutes, we're going to carefully lift up that dough. We don't want to knock any of the air out and want to keep that outside skin intact. We're going to turn it upside down onto a floured surface. That flour is going to help it stop sticking. And now to increase that surface tension and shape the roll, we're going to carefully roll it up. What we're going to try and do here is like make a Cornish pasty by lifting the edges together and creating an oval shaped dough. And now we're going to pinch the edges together of the dough, overlapping it, almost tying it like a little nappy, as you'd imagine, or like I said, a Cornish pasty. And that dough is going to hold itself together, increase the surface tension, and that outside should hold the shape. Comme ça, just like that. So now we're going to repeat the process with the second dough, so we have 2 nicely shaped loaves. And now we're going to carefully lift up that loaf. We're going to turn it upside down, crimp side down in a deep lined tray with baking parchment or greaseproof paper. Now we're going to let them prove for a second time, so you need to cover it up with a damp, clean tea towel, or in restaurants, I used to use a black bin liner, clean one obviously, just to stop the air getting to it and allow it to prove for a second time. Now, after about half an hour, once the bread has proved, we're going to dust flour over the top. And the flour is there to protect the bread against the heat of the oven and give it a nice finish. Now we're going to take this lame, or lame. This is a razor blade attached to a stick and is made to score bread. If you haven't got one, just use a really sharp knife. Next, we're going to take a bit of water and dribble that into the tray. This is really important for this recipe, as we're going to cover it and bake it, and the steam from that water is going to give you a nice lift on the bread. Technical term, it's called an oven spring. For me, the most exciting part of baking sourdough and baking bread like this is when you take the cover off and see how far the bread has sprung up. And now back into the oven, full temperature to give it a really nice colour. I seem to have a Princess Barbie oven that doesn't get that hot, but you want to go as hot as you can to give it a really good, nice caramelisation on the crust. And listen to that, a really nice crunchy crust. The bread springs back to the touch. A really nice, soft, bubbly interior. The perfect artisan loaf of bread. There we go. Hope it was nice and easy. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe if you like content like this. And if you want to see more videos on baking, click this video right here. See you in the next video.